Hi everyone, hope you're keeping well, having a good week. This week's parsha is parsha of Vayishlach, and in it we have the very horrible and traumatic story of what happens to Dina, the daughter of Yaakov and Leah. Now, it's traumatic for me for two reasons. Firstly, when I first learned about it in primary school, I only knew that Dina was kidnapped. And upon rereading it as an adult, I found out that actually she got raped, which is obviously much more traumatic. And secondly, I just read one of the Mefarshim this week, and he says she was only 8 at the time, which is really, really awful. So the Perek talking about this starts off by saying that Dina, the daughter of Leah, who she bore to Yaakov, went out to see the daughters of the place they were in. So Yaakov and family had just made camp in a place called Shechem. And what happened was that a man called Shechem, coincidence? I think not. He was a prince of the town of Shechem. He saw Dina, took a fancy to her, and he kidnapped her and raped her. Now, Rashi says on this posuk that Dina went out. He says, Dina went out. I remember this Vayetze. It also says about her mother Leah that she went out. So he's the first person that says, like mother, like daughter. And reading this, I think to myself, Rashi, what are you saying? I mean, it's a bit out of order, really. Is he suggesting that because she went out her house, that, I don't know, she deserved to be raped, or that it was a bit her fault? And so I was a bit bothered by this, obviously. And so I took a look at what Rashi was talking about. So if you go back to last week's Sedra, we read the story about Leah and Rachel and the Dudaim. Now, Dudaim are a type of flower that Reuven had found in the field, and he brought them home to his mother Leah. And Rachel heard about it, and she knows, or she'd heard, that these Dudaim are very good for fertility. She still didn't have any children, so she made a deal with her sister Leah. She said, you give me your sons Dudaim, that will help with my fertility. And in exchange, this night that Yaakov, our husband, is meant to be with me, instead you can have him. So they came to this kind of arrangement. And it says that later on that day, Leah, that Leah went out and she went to meet Yaakov and to tell him about the arrangement. And there, Rashi comments that Leah went out to greet him. And as a result of this, because she was so proactive in wanting to look after his feelings, that he wouldn't get back to Rachel's tent and be rejected and told, oh, actually, I swapped these flowers for your company and you're going to Leah tonight. She went out to greet him to say, no, come to my tent. We've made this arrangement. I want you tonight. And also because she still really wanted to produce more Shavatim, which was very positive attitude. And Hashem, as a result, blessed her with Yisachar, who was conceived that night. So you can see, actually, that Rashi's being very complimentary to Dina. He's saying, look, Dina was very outgoing, like her mother Leah, who did a really wonderful thing. She went out there and she was a big influencer. We'll see that actually Dina even more so had this quality of Leah, where she went out and she influenced other people. So why was Dina going out? So probably she was going out because she just got to a new place. She wanted to have a look around and she wanted to kind of spread the word. Maybe she was a bit like Avram and Sarah. She was, doing a bit of kiruv, telling people about her family, about their lifestyle, about Hashem. And, she went out with all these good intentions. And so Rashi's not saying she did anything wrong. He's saying, a very unfortunate thing happened to her, but it was nothing to do with her going out. That's not what Rashi is saying. So why did this terrible thing happen to Dina? So if you look back to the beginning of this week's Sedra, the beginning of Vayishlach, Yaakov is going to meet his brother Asof, who he ran away from because Asof had threatened to kill him. And it's the first time he's going to meet him again. And obviously he's petrified because the Asof that he remembers very much hated him and he was a very wicked, horrible man. And he didn't know that anything had changed. So he made all these preparations for this meeting. He was very nervous about it. And we read in the Pasuk that Yaakov crossed over the river with his wives, and it lists all of them, and his sons. And the one person who's missing from this is Dina. She's not mentioned anywhere in the Pasuk. And Rashi there says that Yaakov had put her in a box. that week he'd got a big Amazon delivery. He knew he was going on a long journey. He had like this very big, perfect sized box to fit a little girl in, and he put her in the box because he didn't want Asof to see her. Why didn't he want Asof to see her? Because Asof was a Rosha, and he thought he might see his gorgeous daughter Dina and want to marry her. So he didn't obviously want his brother to have that opportunity, so he hides her in a box. And Rashi actually criticizes him and says at that point that because he hid her in a box and he prevented her from marrying Asof, that's why Yaakov got punished and actually Dina got raped later. If she'd actually let him marry Asof, she probably would have been a very good influence on him, and then she wouldn't have been available for Shechem to find and abduct. So that would have been a better outcome. So actually Yaakov's criticized for holding her back from marrying Asof. Now this is very strange because we know that Leah had exactly the same sentiment about Asof. She spent her childhood crying and davening that she didn't want to marry Asof, and in fact she didn't have to marry Asof, but she's actually never criticized for that. We all think, well, yeah, why would she want to marry Asof? So it's interesting. It highlights the difference between Leah and Dina. I think Leah assessed herself and she quite rightly acknowledged that actually she wouldn't be a strong enough influence to overcome the negative influence of Asof. So she decided, I really shouldn't be marrying him, and she was much better off being married to Yaakov the Tzaddik. Whereas Dina was even more influential and even more outgoing and had such a wonderful personality that she had a very positive influence on people around her. And actually, she would have been very good for Asof. I mean, can you imagine what it would have been like if Yaakov Avinu's twin brother was another Yaakov Avinu? I mean, the world might be a very different place if there were two of them. And Dina had that potential, but Yaakov prevented that from happening. So that's why he's criticized. And we see that actually Dina had a very positive effect on this horrible man, Shechem, because before he met Dina, he was, I mean, we can tell from the story, he was like a horrible rapist. And actually, after he slept with her, he has this transformation, and you can see in the Pesukim, he really falls in love with her and he cares about her, and he's just like very sweet and meek, and he goes to her father Yaakov and says, please can I marry her? And he's very polite about it. He goes to ask for her father's hand in marriage, and he comes to this whole arrangement, and she even influences all the town of Shechem, because the man Shechem promises that the city Shechem will all have bris milah. They all kind of did teshuvah, and they were all kind of going to live this more Toradic lifestyle, all because of Dina. And actually, events transpired that prevented that from happening, because Shimon and Levi then went ahead and killed everyone when they were recovering from their milah. But that is another whole story. But we see that actually Dina was a very big, strong, positive influence in the world. And the story actually does have a happy ending, because the night that she spent with Shechem, she actually conceived a child who was Osnas. And Osnas cropped up a bit later on. She moved to Egypt, and I think she was kind of like a bus bias. She was a bit adopted by Potiphar, and she was in the house when Yosef turned up on the scene, and she ended up marrying Yosef and producing their two children, Menashe and Ephraim, who grew up in Egypt, but despite that, they had these wonderful parents, Yosef and Osnas, and they grew up to be two of the Shavatim. Even though they were only grandsons of Yaakov, not his sons, they were like upgraded to this even higher position. So we see actually there was a positive outcome, and that it was a good thing that Dina went out. Obviously, I'm not suggesting that rape is a good thing. That was horrible. But the end result was good, and she didn't do anything wrong by going out. And in fact, the Lubavitcher Rebbe says that he thinks that Dina is the first kind of female leader, that she actually went out of her own home to start kind of spreading the word. Whereas Sarah and Rivka, they did it in a more, they did have a good influence, but they brought people into their home. Dina was the first one that actually went out to other people to kind of spread the word, and he sees it as a very positive thing. So ladies, you should go out, you should be a positive influence on the world. There is nothing wrong with that. It is very much a good thing to do. And the women's skills and insight, they're different to men's, and we also have something to bring to the table, and we should go out and spread it and do good things in the world. And like Dina, go out in a good way, in a positive way, in a tsanua way, and amazing things will happen. Have a very good week and a very good Shabbos. Keep well.